Shabbat shalom, everyone. I'm really into casual Shabbat. I'm really embracing this. It only felt weird now that I have my sleeves rolled up and my mic exposed. I feel a little bit like a motivational speaker up here. So I'll try to not let that influence the way that I'm going to speak this morning. But it's wonderful to see everyone. It's wonderful to be able to celebrate, to be able to pray together, to sing together, to be able to spend this time together as family, as community. There is one word that for us as religious Jews is absolutely terrifying. And it's terrifying for a variety of different reasons, but probably most terrifying because of its theological significance. And that word is faith. Faith is a word that for us as Jews is really hard to comprehend. It seems weird even to talk about faith on this bima, which is strange, right? That seems somewhat ironic. As a rabbi, I should be very comfortable talking about faith, but it's something that many of us in the clergy don't talk about very often because it doesn't seem so Jewish, right? For many of us, we have an association with faith as belonging to the realm of our brothers and sisters. Christians believe in faith. They have creeds. They have these different ideas that their belief is what is ultimately what saves them. Our Muslim brothers and sisters have a very similar idea that if you convert to Islam, the idea is you say the Shahada. You say this phrase that is about faith, about believing in this ultimate redemption and that Muhammad is the messenger of God and the Quran is true. Faith for Jews, it's a bit complicated. Because as Jews, we have always considered ourselves people of the book, people who study, people who learn, people of intellect. The idea of just saying something blindly, of saying we believe, is somewhat anathema for us. We like to put our faith, we like to put our belief in what we can see, what we can demonstrate, what is in front of us. So even if you ask some people in the Orthodox world, even in the ultra-Orthodox world, they say, what do you believe? What's your theology? It's not important. It's what I do. It's my ma'asim tovim. It's the good deeds that I do. It's my mitzvot. The idea of waking up in the morning and performing mitzvot, of performing commandments, that's what's important. We go so far as to even have a category of different laws, of different mitzvot, that kind of transcend our idea of what we can demonstrate as being good for us. We have these different laws, which we call mishpatim. We have other mitzvot that we consider to be just mitzvot, commandments. And then we have a third category that which we call chok. Chok, which is a category of law, which means that we can't fully understand it. Which seems very appropriate for a parasha this week, a parasha called Hukkat, which comes from this word chok. That this parasha is, in its essence, a parasha of faith or a parasha of lack of faith, depending on how we look at it. And the way that the parasha works is that we open with this idea of the red heifer, with the red cow, that we sacrifice it, we burn it, and we use its ashes to fix our impurity. And the rabbis of the Talmud and the rabbis, the Rishonim and the Achronim, these different commentators try to figure out what exactly is the purpose of this cow. And they all come pretty much, it's impossible to ever get a full consensus. But the majority of them say what? What's the reason for the red cow? We don't know. We don't know. It's chok. There is no reason behind it. We can't tell exactly why this cow and not a different cow. We can't tell why the ashes of a cow can make you pure, while the body of a human being would make you impure. It's chok. It's beyond reason. And then immediately following the red heifer, in a sentence that is, to me, one of the most shocking sentences of all the Torah, in 5 words, is the death of Miriam. 5 words immediately after the red heifer, and then they move on. Miriam's death, who comes from a lack of faith in the leadership of Moses, a lack of faith in this endeavor that they're undertaking. Immediately upon Miriam's death, this magical well that she brings with her that has given sustenance to the Israelites, that have given them water throughout their journey, dries up. And the Israelites are forced to ask again to Moses, where are we going to get water? They have no faith that water will come to them. And Moses, the leader of the Jewish people, comes before them, and God says to Moses, speak unto this rock, and this stone in front of you will usher forth from it water that will add sustenance to everyone, that will once again water the entire camp. And Moses approaches, and what does Moses do? He takes his staff and he strikes the rock instead of speaking to it. And water rushes forth, but he didn't have faith. God told him what needed to be done, and Moses, in his period of anger, in his frustration, in his disbelief, does something different. Following the story of the rock, Aaron dies. Aaron, who also questioned the leadership of Moses, who didn't believe, who didn't have faith in the hierarchy and the leadership that God had created, passes away, is forced to give his kahuna, this priesthood, over to his son, to give all of his garments, to give all of his roles, to give all of his authority over to the people who will succeed him. And our parasha ends with probably the most tangible and palpable way of expressing this doubt, this lack of faith. The Israelites, for the umpteenth time, say to Moses, why are we here? Why have you taken us to this place? We have been wandering in the desert for 40 years, and you've brought us here, what, to die? All of our leadership is gone. All of these different things are happening to us. We encounter war, we encounter famine, we encounter all of these things. What have you done to us to bring us here? And what does God do? At this period of frustration, God sends a plague. And it's a plague that is very physical and very tangible, but is also filled with incredible symbolism. God sends a plague of snakes. Snakes that bite and attack the numerous people, the numerous doubters of the Israelite camp. Now, of course, when we think back to what the snake represents in the Tanakh, we know that the appearance of a snake is never a good thing. When we go all the way back to Bereshit, all the way back to the creation story, it is Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, that are tricked because of their doubt, because of their lack of faith, by a snake. Later, before Yetziat Mitzrayim, when the Israelites are set to go forth from Egypt, Moses and Aaron appear before Pharaoh in his court, and they encounter the magicians that Pharaoh has hired. And one of the tricks, one of these spells, is that Aaron throws his staff against the floor, and it turns into a snake. Because Pharaoh didn't believe in God, Pharaoh's magicians didn't have faith in God. Whenever we see a snake, we know that there is a symbol somewhere of doubt. But if this parasha is filled with this idea of lack of faith, there is one aspect about it that upholds this hope. I think makes this parasha incredibly Jewish. Because if we notice one thing that stands out more than anything in this parasha that is loaded with information, that is loaded with hukim, with things that are beyond our knowledge, with things that we can't ever possibly figure out, there is one image that remains incredibly powerful. And that image is of our leader, of Moshe Rabbeinu, of an individual who is told that he will die before entering the promised land, that this whole adventure, this whole endeavor, this whole journey that he has been on is ultimately not going to be for him. You have been my leader, you have been my mouthpiece, you have been the leader of this people, you have done God's will, but the reward that comes with this is not something that you're going to experience. And for many of us, for most of us, I don't know what we would do in that situation. I think a lot of us would like to think that we would stay strong, that we would do the mission that's in front of us. But it's hard to answer. Because if we don't have a stake, if we don't have part of that reward, it's so much easier to give up, to turn around, and to say you're on your own. But the importance of Moses' leadership, the beauty of Moses' leadership, is that even this individual, our greatest rabbi, our greatest prophet, the one individual in Jewish history who is allowed to speak to God face to face, has doubts. He has doubts in himself, he has doubts in this people, and he has doubts in God. But he never, ever, ever wavers in his faith that this journey is ultimately for the common good. That this is God's will, and God's will is what's going to be right for the Israelite people. That's a tall order. That's an incredible moment of faith to say that you have made it this far, you're not going to enter the promised land, but you still need to be a leader. And you still need to make sure that this people who will have children, who will have grandchildren, who will have generations to come, benefit from your leadership. Faith is really difficult for us as Jews, because part of who we are as Jews is a people filled with paradigms and paragons of people who question, who have doubts, who don't always have faith. But they always have faith in the journey, that what they're doing is ultimately going to benefit the people that are going to come after. Our tradition tells us that we are allowed to ask questions. Not only are we allowed to, but dafka, we should ask questions. We should be able to ask the questions that are most difficult for us. When we feel abandoned, when we feel hurt, when we feel angry, when we feel lost, we are to ask those questions, and we are supposed to ask God those questions. We look to God and we say, why have you done this? Why have you brought me here? Why have you left me alone? But never are we in Judaism allowed to stop working. If we read in Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, we read this beautiful parable, this beautiful image that says that the day is long, the work is hard, and the master is demanding. But just as we are never expected to fully complete the work, we are also not allowed to desist from it. Our goal, our job, our faith comes in the knowledge that what we are doing is good. That we are part of a world that needs us. That we are working hand in hand with God who created this world with its imperfections to say that it is our job to make this world a little bit better. So for all the stories that we have in our faith and our tradition, the one story that stands out most to me as being the most Jewish story that we have is partially from this parasha, which is a story of doubt, but also a story from the Talmud. It says that one of our sages was walking along and he sees a man planting a carob tree. And he says to the man, why are you planting this carob tree? Don't you know it takes 70 years for a carob tree to grow? Why would you be planting this? There's no way that you're going to benefit from it. And the man responds by saying, I'm planting this carob tree for my children and for my children's children, just as my father and my father's fathers planted carob trees of their own. As we enter Shabbat together, we enter this place, this space, this time of peace, of rest, of celebration, of song, and of prayer. But we also enter this period of rest with faith. Faith that we are allowed to ask the important questions. Faith that we're allowed to be challenged and that we're allowed to challenge ourselves. But a faith that every day is worth it. that when we wake up, that we set out to make this world just a little bit better. That's where our faith comes in. In each of our hands are hundreds of seeds of carob trees. And it's up to each and every one of us to plant them and to make this world a little bit better. Shabbat Shalom.